You killed your husband. Drink now and prove your innocence.
No, I am innocent. God knows I am innocent. My husband, don't let your killers go unpunished.
In the heart of Umudim village lived two brothers named Uzo and Okoro. They were twins, born just minutes apart, but their personalities were as different as the sun and the moon. From the very day they began to walk, the villagers noticed it. Uzo was calm, observant and thoughtful, always watching how things were done before trying his hand. Okoro, on the other hand, was bold and restless, asking questions about everything and always eager to try something new, even if it meant failing first. From a young age, Uzo and Okoro learnt the importance of hard work and dedication from their loving parents. Their father, a skilled farmer, believed that the land responded best to patience and respect. At dawn, he would wake the boys with a soft tap on the door and lead them to the farm, teaching them how to till the soil without injuring it, how to read the clouds, and how to know when the earth was thirsty. Their mother, a gentle soul with strong hands, spent her days weaving intricate baskets. As she walked, she told them stories of their ancestors, stories filled with lessons about honesty, sacrifice, and the dangers of greed. Despite their humble beginnings, the brothers shared a deep bond that was forged through laughter, mischief, and endless adventures in the sprawling fields surrounding their home. They hunted grasshoppers together, raced barefoot along narrow paths, and dared each other to climb the tallest trees. When one fell sick, the other refused to leave his side. When one was punished, the other sulked in silent protest. To the villagers, it was impossible to mention Uzo without Okoro, or Okoro without Uzo. Their favorite place was the old mango tree behind their family compound. It stood tall and wide, its branches stretching like open arms. Under its shade, they planned imaginary futures. Okoro often spoke of distant places, of crowded markets and flowing money. Uzo, smiling quietly, imagined beautiful clothes, colors blending together, people wearing garments he created with his own hands. As they grew older, however, their paths began to diverge. Okoro's curiosity about trade and money grew stronger with each passing market day. He watched traders argue, bargain, and laugh, fascinated by how words alone could turn goods into wealth. He began helping traveling merchants carry loads just to listen to their stories about the city. In contrast, Uzo found himself drawn to fabric, needles, and patterns. He watched tailors closely, memorizing every movement. At night, when everyone slept, he practiced stitching with old threads, undoing his work again and again until his fingers learnt perfection. Eventually, Okoro, with his keen eye for business and a heart that refused to be satisfied with village life, decided to seek his fortune in the bustling city of Onitsha. Armed with nothing but determination, courage, and a handful of coins saved from odd jobs, he announced his decision to the family. Their mother wept quietly, torn between fear and pride. Their father said little, but his eyes carried both worry and hope. Meanwhile, Uzo discovered that his passion for fashion was more than a hobby. Villagers began to notice his work, a shirt here, a wrapper there, each one cleaner and more stylish than the last. People started bringing him better fabric, trusting him with important occasions. Some traveled from neighboring villages just to see the quiet twin who could turn cloth into beauty. Though praise came, Uzo remained humble, always remembering where he started. Despite their different pursuits, the bond between Uzo and Okoro remained unbreakable. Every evening before Okoro's departure, they reunited under the same mango tree that had watched them grow. They spoke about fears they did not share with anyone else, about dreams that felt too big to say aloud in daylight. Laughter still came easily between them, but now it carried a hint of seriousness, as though both brothers sensed that change was close. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, Okoro finally revealed his plans to Uzo in full. "Brother," he began, his voice steady but filled with excitement, "I have decided to learn the ways of trade in Onitsha. I will start small, carry loads if I must, but I will not return until I have built something meaningful." Uzo listened quietly, his chest tight with mixed emotions. He was proud, yes, but also afraid of a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. Still, he smiled and clasped his brother's hand firmly. I have no doubt that you will succeed, Okoro. You have always known how to find opportunity where others see nothing. Go and chase your dream. I will be here, holding our roots steady. And so, with a mixture of hope and apprehension, Okoro bid farewell to his family and set off on his journey to Onitsha. The morning he left, the village seemed unusually quiet. Dust rose beneath his feet as he walked away, refusing to look back until he reached the bend in the road. Uzo stood watching long after his brother disappeared from sight, feeling as though a part of himself had gone with him. As for Uzo, he continued to pursue his passion for fashion, pouring his heart into every stitch. His designs grew bolder, his confidence stronger, yet his spirit remained grounded. No matter how busy he became, he always found time to write letters to Okoro, filling them with news from home, encouragement, and reminders that he was never alone. And so the years passed slowly but steadily, each one bringing new challenges and quiet victories. Distance tested the brothers, but it never weakened them. Their bond endured, rooted deeply in shared memories, sacrifice, and love. A bond strong enough to withstand time, distance, and the unknown. After 5 long years of tireless work and quiet endurance, Okoro finally completed his apprenticeship with his boss in Onitsha. Those years had not been easy. He had slept in cramped rooms, eaten meals that barely filled his stomach, and endured insults from customers who looked down on apprentices. But he learned. He watched closely, memorized market patterns, understood the rise and fall of prices, and mastered the art of negotiation. By the time his boss called him aside one evening and told him his training was complete, Okoro felt both relief and fear. The settlement day came quietly. His boss counted the money carefully and handed it to him. Over 3 million naira, money Okoro had never imagined holding at once in his life. As he tied the cash securely and packed his few belongings, pride swelled in his chest. He bowed respectfully to his mentor, thanking him for the lessons, the discipline, and even the harsh moments that had shaped him. As he stepped out into the busy streets, the noise of Onitsha felt different that day. This time, he was no longer someone else's apprentice. He was his own man. Back in Umudim village, life had taken a beautiful turn for Uzo. What began as a small tailoring skill had grown into something much bigger than anyone ever imagined. His designs were no longer limited to village ceremonies and nearby towns. They graced major fashion shows, drawing admiration and praise wherever they appeared. Clients spoke of his work with excitement, calling his designs bold, elegant, and timeless. His shops multiplied steadily, each one better organized and busier than the last. Uzo did not stop there. Remembering how hard it had been for him to learn without proper guidance, he opened a fashion school. Young men and women came from far and near, eager to learn under him. He taught patiently, insisting on discipline, humility, and creativity. To him, success meant nothing if it could not be shared. Despite his growing wealth and recognition, he remained grounded, still greeting villagers with warmth and humility. Even with their lives moving in different directions, Uzo and Okoro remained closely connected. Every few months, Okoro found his way back to Umudim village. Each visit felt like a breath of fresh air. He would sit with his parents, listen to village gossip, and spend long evenings with Uzo, talking deep into the night just like old times. One sunny afternoon, as Uzo sat in his busy workshop surrounded by apprentices and the rhythmic hum of sewing machines, he focused intently on stitching a new gown. The fabric shimmered under his fingers when suddenly the door flew open. "Uzo, my dear brother," Okoro's voice rang out as he rushed forward, pulling Uzo into a tight embrace. Uzo laughed heartily, surprised but delighted. "Indeed, it has been too long," he replied, stepping back to look at his brother properly. "You look stronger. The city has not swallowed you yet." Okoro chuckled, but as he sat beside Uzo, his excitement softened. "I have news," he said slowly. "I have decided to start my own business in Onitsha." Uzo's face lit up instantly. "That is wonderful news. This is what you trained for," he said, patting Okoro's back. "You have always been sharp. I believe in you." Okoro smiled, grateful for the encouragement, yet inside him lived a quiet fear. He knew the city was unforgiving. Many had tried and failed. Still, hearing Uzo's confidence strengthened his resolve. With renewed determination, Okoro returned to Onitsha and rented a small shop in a crowded section of the market. He stocked goods carefully, arranged them neatly, and greeted customers with enthusiasm. Each morning he opened his shop early and closed late, hoping each new day would be better than the last. But the city tested him. Competition was fierce. Bigger traders undersold him, customers bargained harshly, and some days passed without a single sale. Weeks turned into months, and slowly the money he had saved began to shrink. At night, Okoro lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if he had made a mistake. Doubt crept into his heart, whispering questions he tried hard to ignore. Meanwhile, Uzo's success continued to grow. New shops opened, his brand spread further, and his schedule became increasingly busy. Yet, no matter how high he rose, his thoughts often drifted back to his brother. Each time Okoro returned home looking tired and discouraged, Uzo noticed. "Brother," Uzo would say gently, placing a reassuring hand on Okoro's shoulder, "do not give up. Every strong tree begins as a fragile seed. Your time will come." Those words became Okoro's anchor. Though his journey was filled with uncertainty and hardship, he held on to his brother's faith in him. And even as challenges surrounded him, one truth remained clear in his heart. As long as Uzo stood beside him, believing in him, he was not alone. As the years passed, quietly but steadily, both Uzo and Okoro found love and began families of their own, each building a home shaped by his own journey. Time softened some struggles and sharpened others, but life moved forward all the same. Okoro met Nkechi during one of his frequent visits back to Umudim village. She was calm, hardworking, and carried herself with a patience that soothed his restless spirit. Unlike others who judged him by his unstable finances, Nkechi saw the effort behind his struggles. She believed in him when his confidence was at its lowest, and that belief alone felt like a blessing. Their marriage was simple but joyful, celebrated under the open sky with laughter, dancing, and prayers for a better tomorrow. Children soon followed, one after the other, their home filled with life. Chinedu came first, curious and sharp-eyed. Then Obina, quieter but observant. Emeka followed, stubborn and fearless. And finally, little Chioma, whose laughter could soften even Okoro's darkest days. Their modest home in Umudim village was never quiet. Bare feet ran across the floor, voices echoed from morning till night, and no matter how empty Okoro's pockets were, his house was full of love. Uzo's life took a different shape. In Aba, he met Sharon, a graceful woman with intelligence and ambition of her own. She admired Uzo's discipline, his creativity, and his humility despite success. They bonded over shared dreams, building a legacy, raising children with values, and giving back to society. Their marriage was built on mutual respect and clear communication, and together they formed a powerful partnership. Their children, Adaobi and Esomchi, were raised in comfort but not indulgence. Sharon made sure they understood the value of hard work, while Uzo ensured they never lacked love or guidance. Their home reflected their life. Bright fabrics hanging neatly, sewing machines humming, staff moving respectfully, and warmth filling every corner. Despite the distance between Umudim and Aba, the brothers remained deeply connected. Every few months, Okoro would gather his courage and travel to Aba. Each journey carried hope mixed with shame. He often arrived with tired eyes, worn clothes, and the heavy weight of failure pressing on his shoulders. Uzo never turned him away. Each visit followed a familiar pattern. Uzo would welcome him warmly, insisting he eat first, asking about Nkechi and the children. Only after Okoro had rested would Uzo gently ask what brought him this time. And with lowered eyes, Okoro would speak about a business that collapsed due to bad advice, money lost to dishonest partners, loans he could no longer repay, or school fees overdue. Uzo listened every time. He never mocked, never scolded. He encouraged, reassured, and then helped. Money was sent, Debts were settled, school fees were paid. Sometimes Uzo even helped Okoro start afresh, connecting him to opportunities or offering capital once more. To Uzo, it was simple. Okoro was not just his brother, he was his twin, his other half. Helping him felt like helping himself. But Sharon watched quietly. At first, she said nothing. She respected family bonds and admired Uzo's generosity. Yet, as the years passed, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Large sums left their accounts regularly. Plans they made for expansion were delayed. Savings meant for their children's future were touched. Late at night, when the house was quiet and only the hum of distant generators filled the air, Sharon finally spoke. Uzo, she said gently, I know your heart is good. I know Okoro is your brother, but this is becoming too much. Uzo sighed deeply. What do you want me to do, Sharon? Watch him suffer? She didn't want him to suffer, she replied softly. But I'm afraid your help is keeping him stuck. He comes to you every time things go wrong. He never learns to face consequences. Her words cut deep because they were true. Uzo struggled with guilt. He thought of their childhood, the mango tree, the promises they made to always stand by each other. He thought of Okoro's children, innocent and unaware of the weight hanging over their father. How could he say no? Yet Sharon's fears grew. She worried about their own children, about what would happen if something happened to Uzo, about the resentment that could quietly grow where love once lived. Still, Uzo continued helping. What he did not see was how his generosity slowly changed Okoro. At first, Okoro was grateful, truly grateful, but over time, dependence replaced desperation. Each failure became easier to bear because he knew there was a safety net. Risky decisions felt less frightening. Planning became careless. Responsibility shifted silently from his shoulders to his brother's. Nkechi noticed it too. Some nights she lay awake beside Okoro, staring at the ceiling, worry heavy in her chest. This cannot continue, she whispered once. Your brother will not always be there. Okoro snapped back defensively. So you want me to starve? You want our children to suffer? No, she said, tears in her eyes. I want you to fight harder for yourself. But pride and comfort drowned out her voice. Back in Aba, Sharon's patience thinned. Arguments became frequent. Not loud, not dramatic, but heavy, painful conversations filled with unspoken fears. Our family is drifting, Uzo, she said one night. I feel like we are carrying two households on one back. Uzo had no answer. And slowly, without realizing it, cracks began to form. Not just in finances, but in trust, in peace, in balance. What started as brotherly love had grown into a dangerous cycle. And though Uzo believed he was holding his family together, the truth was far more fragile. Unseen, unheard, and unacknowledged, the ultimate test approached, one that would force Uzo to choose between saving his brother or saving his own home. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the village of Umudim, Uzo sat quietly in his cozy home in Aba, lost in thought. The house was calm, but his mind was anything but. The weight of the past few years pressed heavily on his chest. Every late-night call from Okoro, every urgent plea for help, every promise that things would get better. He had given so much, yet peace continued to slip through his fingers like sand. Sharon sat beside him, watching his face closely. She had learned to read his silence. When Uzo went quiet like this, it meant his heart was wrestling with something heavy. Sharon, he finally said, breaking the silence, his voice low and tired. I've been thinking a lot about Okoro lately. He's been struggling for so long, and I can't bear to see him suffer anymore. Sharon nodded slowly. Her eyes softened, filled with empathy, but also with the quiet wisdom born from years of watching the same cycle repeat itself. I understand, Uzo, she replied gently. He is your brother, your twin. Anyone in your place would feel the same. But love alone cannot save him. We can't keep bailing him out forever. He needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet. Uzo leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Her words echoed loudly in his mind, because deep down he knew she was right. Yet guilt wrapped itself around his heart like a chain. I know, Sharon, he said quietly. I know you're right. But every time I think of saying no to him, I see his children. I see Chinedu, Obina, Emeka, Chioma. I remember our parents. I feel like I'm betraying them all. Sharon reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. You are not responsible for Okoro's choices, Uzo. You've done more than most people would ever do. Still, if there is one last thing you want to try, then it must come with boundaries. Her words hung in the air, and suddenly, something clicked in Uzo's mind. An idea formed slowly, then all at once, bold, frightening, and final. Uzo, he said sitting upright, eyes alive with resolution. What if I give Okoro one last chance? Not another small help, not another rescue, a real chance. Sharon raised her eyebrows slightly, listening. What if I give him enough money to truly start afresh, but with a clear warning? No excuses, no second chances. If he fails this time, I step back completely. Sharon studied her husband's face. She could see the seriousness there, the pain, the hope, the desperation to finally close this chapter with a clear conscience. Uzo, she said carefully, that is a big risk. What if he wastes it again? What if this breaks us financially? I've thought about that, and it scares me, but I need to know that I tried everything. If he fails after this, then I will finally have peace in my heart knowing I did all I could. Sharon was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. If you do this, she said, it must truly be the last time. Not just in words, but in your heart. Uzo nodded. It will be. With that decision made, Uzo moved quickly. He called Okoro and asked him to come to Aba. His voice on the phone was calm but firm, different from before. Okoro sensed it immediately. When Okoro arrived, he was ushered into Uzo's living room. The comfort of the house, the polished floors, the quiet confidence of wealth made him uneasy. He sat nervously, hands clasped, eyes darting around. Brother, Uzo began, sitting across him, his voice now low and firm. I'm not calling you here to ask questions or to listen to excuses. Okoro swallowed hard. I'm giving you one final opportunity. I am giving you 20 million naira to start a proper business. Not to survive, but to build something lasting. But this is the last time. If this money is wasted, I will not rescue you again. Ever. For a moment, Okoro couldn't breathe. 20 million naira sounded unreal. His eyes widened, his mouth opened slightly, and tears pooled instantly. Uzo, he whispered, shaking, you don't know what this means to me. I know exactly what it means, Uzo replied calmly. That's why I'm doing it. Okoro fell to his knees, overcome with emotion. I swear to you, brother, I swear on our parents, on my children, on everything I hold dear, I will not waste this chance. Uzo helped him up, searching his face for sincerity. He wanted so badly to believe him. When Okoro returned home to Umudim and showed Nkechi the money, their house erupted in joy. Nkechi screamed with happiness, dancing around the room. The children laughed, confused, but excited by the sudden energy. This is it, Nkechi said breathlessly. Our lives have changed. But instead of sitting down to plan carefully, temptation crept in quietly. They upgraded their home almost immediately. New furniture replaced old ones that still worked. Expensive electronics filled the house. The children were transferred to elite private schools with high fees. Clothes, parties, celebrations, everything happened at once. We deserve this, Okoro said whenever Nkechi hesitated. We've suffered enough. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. No business plan was written. No shop was secured. Each time the idea came up, there was always something else to spend on first. The money that was meant to create stability was bleeding away in small, careless cuts. Soon, the balance shrank alarmingly. Panic set in too late. By the time reality hit, the money was gone. When Uzo finally learned the truth, it felt as though something inside him shattered. He sat alone in his room, unable to speak. All the hope he had carried, all the faith he had placed in Okoro collapsed into a deep, aching silence. Sharon, he said eventually, his voice breaking. What have I done? Sharon held him tightly as he trembled. You loved, she said softly. That was never wrong. But now, you must protect what remains. Uzo closed his eyes, grief washing over him, not just for the money, but for the brother he thought would finally rise. And as the night grew darker around them, one truth became clear. The storm they feared was no longer approaching. It had already begun. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the weight of Uzo's frustration grew heavier, settling deep in his chest like an unrelenting burden. At first, he tried to silence it with patience and prayer, convincing himself that endurance was the price of brotherhood. But each new report of Okoro's recklessness reopened old wounds. It was no longer just about money. It was about patterns that refused to change, lessons that were never learned, and responsibility that was always shifted onto someone else. In his workshop in Aba, surrounded by the familiar hum of sewing machines and the scent of freshly cut fabric, Uzo often found himself staring blankly at his hands. These were the same hands that had built his empire stitch by stitch, the same hands that had written countless checks to save his brother from ruin. Yet now, they felt tired. Tired of rescuing, tired of hoping, tired of disappointment. That evening, as workers gradually closed for the day and the last machine fell silent, Uzo sat alone on a wooden stool, the shadows of the workshop stretching long across the floor. Sharon entered quietly, immediately sensing the heaviness in the room. "Uzo," he said, his voice low and strained, "I don't know what to do about Okoro anymore. Every time I help him, I feel like I'm pushing him deeper into a pit instead of pulling him out. I'm scared that I'm destroying him by trying to save him." Sharon sat beside him, placing her hand gently over his. Her eyes were calm but firm, the eyes of a woman who had watched love turn into exhaustion. "My love," she said softly, "you have carried your brother for years. You've done more than enough. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is to step back. Pain can teach lessons that comfort never will." Uzo swallowed hard. He knew she was right, but knowing did not make it easier. The bond between him and Okoro was not ordinary. It was woven from shared blood, shared childhood, shared suffering. Cutting support felt like tearing a piece of himself away. The next time Okoro came to Aba, the tension was already thick before a word was spoken. He arrived unannounced, eyes restless, movement sharp, desperation clinging to him like sweat. "Brother," Okoro began almost immediately, "things have gone bad again. Just help me this once more. I swear it's the last time." Uzo stood still, his heart pounding painfully against his ribs. He remembered Sharon's words. He remembered the promises Okoro had broken. He remembered the 20 million naira that had vanished without a single foundation lead. "I'm sorry, Okoro," Uzo said quietly, his voice steady but heavy. "I love you, Okoro, but I won't destroy myself or my family to save you from choices you refuse to change." That was the last thing Okoro heard. He stormed out, his fury trailing behind him like smoke. As the door slammed shut, Uzo felt an ache unlike anything he had known before. He knew this moment had changed everything. Back in Umudim village, Okoro's anger fermented into bitterness. Each day that passed without help from Uzo fed his resentment. He replayed the rejection in his mind, twisting the memory until Uzo became the villain and he the victim. Nkechi listened as Okoro ranted night after night. At first, she tried to calm him, but hunger, unpaid school fees, and shame wore down her patience. Slowly, her sympathy turned into agreement. "He has abandoned us," she said one evening, bitterness dripping from her words. "Your own brother." That sentence became fuel. Together, they began to talk, at first just to close relatives, then to neighbors, then to anyone who would listen. Stories were exaggerated, facts distorted, motives poisoned. "Uzo is wicked," Okoro would say loudly in village gatherings, and that wife of his, Nkechi, would add with venom. "She has turned him against his own blood. She is the one controlling him." Rumors spread faster than truth ever could. In Umudim village, whispers grew into declarations. People shook their heads in disappointment whenever Uzo's name was mentioned. Some claimed Sharon used charms. Others said Uzo had always been proud and selfish, that Okoro was simply too blind to see it before. When Uzo and Sharon visited the village, the change was immediate and painful. Greetings were cold, conversations stopped when they approached, old friends avoided eye contact. Even relatives acted distant, choosing silence over loyalty. Sharon felt it deeply. She wept quietly at night, not because of the lies, but because of the loneliness they brought. "My love," she whispered once, "I never imagined kindness would lead us here." Uzo held her tightly, guilt and anger battling inside him. He questioned himself constantly. Had he done the right thing? Was he cruel? Was love supposed to hurt this much? Yet, even as they were shunned, they remained united. They refused to retaliate. They refused to explain themselves to gossip-hungry ears. They chose silence and dignity. But Okoro was not finished. His bitterness grew darker, more dangerous. Each rejection hardened him. Each rumor fed his need for revenge. He convinced himself that Uzo had stolen his destiny, that everything Uzo owned should have been his too. And in the shadows of his anger, a plan began to form, slow, deliberate, and cruel. A plan born from envy, humiliation, and wounded pride. A plan that would not only punish Uzo, but destroy everything he loved. Unaware of the storm gathering beyond the horizon, Uzo and Sharon held on to each other, believing the worst had passed. They were wrong. The village of Umudim lay under a heavy blanket of darkness that night. The kind of darkness that felt alive, thick with unspoken secrets and restless spirits. Even the crickets seemed to have gone silent, as though nature itself sensed the evil stirring within its borders. Okoro moved through the narrow winding paths like a man possessed. His footsteps hurried, uneven, driven not by direction but by obsession. His heart thundered in his chest, but it was no longer fear alone that pushed him forward. It was humiliation. It was envy. It was years of feeling small beside a brother who seemed to rise no matter how many times life tried to knock him down. Every memory replayed itself cruelly in his mind. Uzo's calm confidence, his success, the respect he commanded without begging for it, and worst of all, the moment Uzo had said no. That single word had shattered Okoro's pride. As he walked, his thoughts twisted reality into something darker. In his mind, Uzo was no longer a generous brother who had sacrificed endlessly for him. Uzo became a thief of destiny, a man who had hoarded blessings meant for two and left his twin to starve in shame. By the time Okoro reached the outskirts of Umudim, his heart had hardened beyond recognition. There, hidden among ancient trees whose roots clawed the earth like skeletal fingers, stood a small hut. It looked older than the village itself, its walls stained with age and secrets. A single lantern flickered outside, its weak light casting warped shadows that danced like spirits against the mud walls. The air smelt wrong, thick with smoke, herbs, and decay. Okoro paused. For the briefest moment, doubt crept in. His hands trembled. Somewhere deep inside him, a small voice whispered Uzo's name, not in anger, but in memory. Twins under a mango tree, shared laughter, shared hunger. But then another voice rose louder, crueler. He abandoned you. Okoro clenched his fists and pushed the door open. The hut groaned as though protesting his entry. Inside, the air was suffocating. Bundles of dried leaves hung from the ceiling, bones, cowries, and strange symbols lined the walls. Candles flickered weakly, their flames bending unnaturally as if afraid. At the center of the hut sat a figure cloaked in shadow, face hidden beneath a dark hood. The only thing visible were eyes, sharp, glowing faintly, watching Okoro with unsettling calm. "Greetings, my son," the figure said, voice low, cracked, and ancient. "Few come here without being chased by darkness. What burden brings you tonight?" Okoro swallowed. His throat felt tight, his tongue heavy. I need help," he said, forcing the words out. "I need power, justice." The figure chuckled, a dry, hollow sound. "Those who come here often confuse justice with revenge." Okoro stepped closer. "There is a man who has ruined my life," he said, his voice shaking now, not with fear, but rage. "He stands in the way of my destiny." "And who is this man?" the figure asked, calmly. Okoro hesitated. His chest burned. Saying the name felt like tearing flesh from bone. But he said it anyway. "My brother, Uzo." The candles flared violently. The figure tilted its head slowly. "Blood," it murmured, "the strongest offering of all." "I want him gone," Okoro continued hurriedly, as though afraid his courage would fade. "Everything I touch fails. Everything he touches prospers. That should be mine. We were born the same day. That life belongs to me too. Silence swallowed the hot. Then the figure spoke again, voice colder now. The price for such a request is not measured in money alone. Blood demands blood. Are you prepared to live with what follows? Okoro's mind flashed with images. Mocking villagers, hungry children, Sharon's tears, Uzo's firm refusal. Yes, he said. Anything. The figure arose slowly. As it stood, Okoro saw symbols carved into his skin, scars shaped like ancient script. The air grew heavy, pressing down on his chest. Then kneel, the witch doctor commanded. Okoro obeyed. The ritual began. Chants filled the hut, words older than language itself. The witch doctor circled Okoro, sprinkling powders that burned the eyes and throat. A calabash was brought out, filled with dark liquid. The figure sliced his palm and let blood drip into it, then gestured for Okoro. His hands shook violently as he did the same. The mixture hissed. Speak his name, the witch doctor demanded. Uzo, Okoro whispered. Louder. Uzo! The flames leapt higher. The wind outside howled. The ground beneath the hut vibrated faintly. What you ask for will be granted, the witch doctor said. But not this. When blood is spilled unjustly, it never ends with one death. Okoro barely listened. All he felt was relief, satisfaction, victory. At dawn, Umudim awoke to screams. Uzo was found lying on the floor of his workshop, surrounded by half-finished designs, fabric still clutched in his lifeless hands. His eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, as though frozen in surprise. There were no wounds, no signs of struggle, just silence where life once thrived. Sharon collapsed when she saw him. Her screams tore through the compound, raw and animalistic. Adabuchi clung to her, crying uncontrollably. Esomichi stood frozen, too young to understand death, yet old enough to feel its cruelty. The village gathered quickly. Shock rippled through the crowd. Uzo, strong, healthy, full of life, dead overnight? It made no sense. Whispers began immediately. This is not natural. No sickness. He was fine yesterday. Eyes slowly turned towards Okoro. He arrived late, face carefully composed, eyes red as though from tears. He cried loudly, beat his chest and fell beside the body, wailing, "My brother, my twin!" But guilt is a heavy thing. It leaks through cracks no matter how well one pretends. Some villagers noticed his trembling hands. Others remembered his bitterness, his loud complaints, his sudden visits to dark places. Sharon watched him silently. Her heart knew. As Uzo was buried beneath the earth of Umudim, the sky darkened unnaturally. Thunder rolling in the distance, though rain did not fall. The village mourned, but unease lingered like a shadow that refused to lift. That night, Okoro could not sleep. No matter how tightly he closed his eyes, he saw Uzo's face. Not angry, not accusing, but disappointed. The guilt pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating. He had wanted freedom. Instead, he had invited something far darker into his life. And though he stood among the mourners with dry eyes and practiced sorrow, deep inside, Okoro knew the truth. Uzo was gone, but this was only the beginning. Okoro's face remained carefully arranged into a mask of grief and sorrow as he moved among the mourners, receiving condolences and bowing his head at the right moments. He cried when expected to cry, sighed when silence demanded it, and spoke softly of loss when ears were near. Yet beneath that practiced display, a violent storm raged within him. One made of guilt so heavy it stole his sleep, and fear so sharp it made his heart leap at every whisper. At night, when the village settled into an easy quiet, Okoro lay awake staring into darkness. Uzo's face returned again and again, not the lifeless body found in the workshop, but the living man he once knew. Calm eyes, steady voice, hands skilled and patient. Sometimes, Uzo said nothing, only stared at him with disappointment that burned more painfully than any accusation. Other times, the vision spoke. "Brother," the voice would whisper. "Was this the only way?" Okoro would wake drenched in sweat, gasping for air, clutching his chest as though his heart might burst. He tried to pray, but the words tangled on his tongue. He tried to sleep, but sleep rejected him. Each passing day tightened the grip of his guilt until breathing itself felt like punishment. The villagers, meanwhile, were restless. Uzo's death refused to settle into a neat explanation. He had been strong, healthy, full of plans. There were no signs of sickness, no struggle, no warning. Elders gathered in hushed groups. Women whispered while fetching water. Men shook their heads thoughtfully at evening fires. This is not ordinary, some said. There is more to this, others agreed. Every whispered doubt felt like a drumbeat inside Okoro's skull. At first, guilt kept him silent, but guilt soon turned into terror, and terror, when cornered, searches desperately for escape. Slowly, a dangerous thought took root in Okoro's mind. If they must blame someone, he reasoned, let it not be me. The thought grew bolder with each passing day. He remembered Sharon's argument with Uzo, remembered how easily people believed stories that fit old fears. By the time the thought fully formed, it no longer felt like a choice. It felt like survival. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in deep hues of orange and gold, the villagers gathered at the square. The elders had called for a meeting, hoping to calm rumors and restore peace. But Okoro arrived with something else burning in his chest, an urgency born from desperation. He stepped forward before anyone could stop him. My fellow villagers, he began, his voice trembling convincingly as he clutched his chest. We are here today mourning my dear brother Uzo, a man we all loved and respected. Soft murmurs of agreement followed. But let us not deceive ourselves, Okoro continued, raising his voice. My brother did not die a natural death. A wave of uneasy murmurs rippled through the crowd. There was foul play, he said firmly, a dark hand at work. Sharon, standing quietly among the women, stiffened. And I have come to realize, Okoro went on, his voice cracking at just the right moment, that the truth has been staring us in the face all along. The square fell silent. Okoro turned slowly, deliberately, until his eyes locked onto Sharon. It was his wife, Sharon. The reaction was immediate. Gasps exploded across the square. Some women cried out, others covered their mouths in shock. A few men exchanged uneasy glances. Sharon felt the ground sway beneath her feet. What? She whispered, barely able to breathe. How dare you accuse me of such a thing? She cried aloud moments later, her voice shaking as she stepped forward. I loved my husband. I would have given my life for him. Okoro raised his hands dramatically. Do not be deceived by tears and sweet words. This woman came from outside our ways. She changed my brother, turned him against his blood, and now he is dead. That is a lie, Sharon shouted, tears streaming down her face. You know it's a lie. But Okoro pressed on, his voice growing stronger as the crowd listened. She used charms, dark powers. She bewitched him, isolated him from his family, and when she no longer needed him, she destroyed him. The words struck like stones. Sharon felt hands pulling her back as murmurs of suspicion grew louder. Some women nodded slowly, as though pieces of a twisted puzzle were falling into place. I warned my brother about her, Okoro continued, but he would not listen. Now see where we are. That's enough, Sharon cried, her voice breaking. You know nothing of our marriage. Uzo was happy. He was at peace. An elder raised his hand, calling for order. These are serious accusations, Okoro. Do you have proof? Okoro hesitated only briefly. The proof is in the outcome, he replied. Healthy men do not die overnight. Only evil explains this. The crowd buzzed uneasily. Fear has a way of bending truth, and doubt, once planted, spreads fast. Sharon stood trembling, surrounded by eyes that no longer looked at her with sympathy, but suspicion. She felt utterly alone. Her children clung to her wrapper, crying softly, sensing danger they could not understand. You cannot do this, Sharon said hoarsely. You cannot kill him again by killing his name. But Okoro looked away. That night, Sharon did not sleep. She sat awake beside her children, holding them close, listening to every sound outside the house. Each footstep made her heart race. Each distant voice felt like a threat. In the days that followed, life became a nightmare. People avoided her. Some refused to greet her. Others whispered openly when she passed. The children were mocked, called names they were too young to understand. She is a witch's child. Her mother killed her father. The words cut deeper than knives. Yet, Sharon refused to break. She mourned Uzo in silence, lighting a small lamp each night beside his photograph. She spoke to him softly, telling him what was happening, asking him for strength. I will not let them destroy what we built, she whispered one night, tears sliding down her cheeks. I will not let your name be stained. A quiet resolve began to grow within her. If the truth was hidden in darkness, she would bring it into the light. She began asking questions, carefully, quietly. She spoke to those who still believed in her kindness. She listened more than she spoke, and slowly fragments emerged. Someone had seen Okoro near the outskirts of the village late at night before Uzo's death. Another remembered strange chanting carried by the wind. An old woman recalled seeing Okoro return at dawn, eyes wild, clothes smelling of incense. The pieces did not yet form a full picture, but Sharon held onto them tightly. She knew the road ahead would be dangerous. She knew the village was already leaning against her, but she also knew this. The truth has a way of demanding to be heard. And though darkness still ruled Mudim, somewhere beneath it, justice was staring, waiting for the moment it would rise and expose every lie. For now, Sharon stood alone, but she would not remain silent. As the accusations against Sharon grew louder and more venomous, Umudim village slowly split into two uneasy halves. On one side were those who remembered Sharon's kindness, the way she helped women during childbirth, the respect she showed the elders, the quiet strength with which she stood beside Uzo through years of gossip and hardship. On the other side were villagers whose minds had been poisoned by fear, superstition, and Okoro's carefully planted words. To them, Sharon was no longer a grieving widow. She was a threat, an outsider, a one too strong, too different, too modern to be trusted. Every market day became a court without a judge. Women whispered behind their wrappers. Men spoke in low tones at palm wine joints. Children repeated words they did not understand. She killed her husband. She used charms. See how calm she is. Does a guilty person cry forever? Sharon heard it all. At first, she stayed indoors, shielding her children from the cruel stares and sharp tongues, but silence only fueled suspicion. The louder the rumors became, the more the villagers convinced themselves that there must be truth in them. Fear thrives where clarity is absent, and Umudim was drowning in fear. One afternoon, the murmurs turned into action. A group of villagers, men and women alike, marched toward Sharon's compound. Their faces were hard, their voices raised. Some carried sticks, others clutched prayer beads or charms as though preparing for battle. The elders followed behind, torn between reason and pressure from the crowd. "Come out, Sharon," someone shouted. Sharon stepped outside slowly, her children clinging to her wrapper. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared it might betray her courage, yet she lifted her chin and faced them head-on. "What is it you want from me?" she asked calmly. "We want the truth," another voice yelled. "We want answers." "I have accused you without proof," Sharon replied, her voice firm. "I am innocent." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Innocent people don't fear trials," a man said coldly. "I do not fear justice," Sharon answered. "I fear injustice." The elders exchanged glances. One of them, gray-bearded and weary, stepped forward. "Sharon," he said, "the village is restless. Words alone can no longer calm them. According to our customs, when doubt refuses to die, the gods must decide." Sharon felt a chill crawl up her spine. She knew what that meant. "There is a test," the elder continued gravely. "A sacred oath. If you are innocent, the gods will protect you. If you are guilty, they will reveal it." A murmur of approval swept through the crowd. Sharon closed her eyes briefly. She thought of Uzo, his voice, his laughter, the way he believed in fairness even when the world was cruel. She thought of her children, whose small hands trembled in hers. "I will do it," she said quietly. The square fell silent. Preparations were made quickly. The same water that had been washed to use Uzo's lifeless body was brought out in a calabash. In Umudim tradition, such water was believed to carry truth. The innocent would live, the guilty would not survive its judgment. As the calabash was placed before her, her hands trembled, not because she doubted her innocence, but because she was human. Fear clawed at her chest. What if the gods were silent? What if the village twisted the outcome no matter what happened? She lifted the cup slowly. "Forgive me, Uzo," she whispered. "Forgive me for having to prove what you already knew." She drank. The liquid was bitter, metallic, and cold. It burnt her throat and churned her stomach. For a brief moment, dizziness washed over her, and the crowd held its breath. Seconds stretched into unbearable minutes. Some villagers leaned forward, eyes wide, waiting for her to collapse. Okoro, standing at the edge of the crowd, clenched his fist so tightly his nails cut into his palms. His heart raced, not with fear for Sharon, but with terror that his lies were about to unravel. But nothing happened. Sharon stood still, breathing, alive. Minutes passed, then more. A murmur rose, confused, uncertain. She's fine. The gods have spoken. Suddenly a woman cried out, "She is innocent!" The square erupted. Cheers broke out. Some villagers dropped to their knees in relief. Others bowed their heads in shame. The elders raised their staffs, signaling the verdict. "The gods have judged," the gray-bearded elder announced. "Sharon is innocent." Sharon collapsed, not from poison, but from exhaustion. Women rushed to support her. Tears streamed down her face, not of fear this time, but of overwhelming relief. Her children clung to her, crying freely at last. But while the village rejoiced, one man burned from within. Okoro stood frozen, his face pale, his mouth dry. The cheers sounded like mockery in his ears. His carefully built lies had crumbled in a single moment. People turned to look at him, not with certainty, but with suspicion. Whispers shifted direction. If she is innocent, then who lied? Who accused her so boldly? Who benefited from her disgrace? Okoro felt the ground slipping beneath his feet. That night he did not sleep. His guilt, once buried beneath anger, rose like a beast freed from chains. Shadows danced on his walls, twisting into shapes that looked like Uzo's face. He heard footsteps where none existed. He felt cold fingers brush his skin. By dawn, his fear turned into madness. "If she lives," he muttered to himself, pacing his room, "then I am finished." Desperation drove him once more, not to repentance, but to evil. He began spreading a new story. This time he was careful. He spoke in whispers, planting doubts rather than accusations. "The gods spared her because she is powerful," he told a few trusted ears. "Witches survive tests meant to expose them. This is not over." Fear returned, creeping back into Umudim like smoke. Soon, strange things began to happen. A child fell ill suddenly and screamed Uzo's name in his sleep. A goat died mysteriously at Okoro's compound. At night, people heard crying near Uzo's grave, soft, mournful sounds that chilled the bones. "The dead are restless," some whispered. "An innocent blood cries from justice," others said. Sharon felt it too. One night, as she slept, she dreamt of Uzo standing by their mango tree, his face calm but sad. "Do not be afraid," he told her. "The truth cannot be buried forever." She woke up with tears on her face and a strange certainty in her heart. The spirits had not finished speaking, and Okoro, trapped between his guilt and his greed, had already gone too far to turn back. He believed he could outwit both man and spirit. He was wrong, because when the dead rise to demand justice, no lie, no matter how carefully woven, can survive the reckoning that follows. After 3 long months of mourning her beloved husband, Sharon finally gathered the strength to leave Umudim village and return to Aba with her 2 children, Adaobi and Esomchi. Those months had drained her in ways she never imagined possible. Each day felt heavier than the last, filled with memories she could not escape and questions that had no answers. Yet, she told herself that returning home would bring some form of healing. Aba was where Uzo had built his dreams, where laughter once echoed through their halls, where life had felt hopeful and alive. As the vehicle slowed near their street, Sharon's heart beat faster. The familiar sight stirred old emotions, joy mixed with grief. Adaobi leaned against the window, searching eagerly for the house she remembered, while Esomchi clutched his mother's wrapper, quiet and watchful. When they finally stood before their home, Sharon froze. Something was wrong. The gate, once welcoming and wide open, was locked with a thick chain. The paint on the walls looked untouched, but the spirit of the house felt cold and hostile. Sharon approached the door with trembling hands and slid the key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. She tried again, panic rising in her chest. Still nothing. "Mama?" Adaobi asked softly, confusion clouding her young face. "Why is the door not opening?" Sharon swallowed hard, her throat tightening as tears threatened to spill. She knelt before her children and forced a smile that nearly broke her. "It seems someone has locked the house," she said carefully. "But don't worry, Mama will sort it out." Inside, fear screamed. She already knew what this meant. With nowhere else to go, Sharon took her children to stay with a trusted friend. That night, she barely slept. The walls felt unfamiliar, the silence was loud, and deep in her heart, a terrible certainty grew. The next morning, Sharon decided to face reality. She went to check Uzo's businesses, the fashion houses, the shops, the workshops he had built with years of sweat and sacrifice. One by one, her hope collapsed. Every single shop was locked. Heavy padlocks hung from the doors like symbols of betrayal. Notices were pasted boldly on the walls, declaring new ownership. Sharon felt her knees weaken as she stared at them. Her hands shook uncontrollably. Only one name could be behind this. Okoro. Rage, unlike anything she had ever known, flooded her veins. Without hesitation, Sharon returned to Omudim village. Her heart pounded as she approached Okoro's compound. When she saw him sitting calmly, as though nothing in the world was wrong, something inside her snapped. "Okoro," she cried, her voice shaking with fury. "Why have you done this?" He looked up slowly, his eyes cold and unapologetic. "Why have you locked us out of our home? Why have you taken over Uzo's businesses? What right do you have?" Okoro stood up, towering over her, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Because Uzo is dead, and everything he owned belongs to his blood. That is me." Sharon gasped, clutching her chest. "You know that's not true. I am his wife. Those children are his blood." Okoro laughed harshly. "You are nothing here. You and your children have no right to anything Uzo left behind." These words shattered Sharon's heart completely. She felt as though the ground beneath her feet had disappeared. The man before her no longer resembled the brother Uzo once loved. This was a stranger, cruel, greedy, and devoid of humanity. "You will regret this," Sharon said quietly, her voice heavy with pain and resolve. Okoro scoffed and turned away. Sharon returned to Aba with her children, broken but not defeated. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Each day brought fresh pain. Okoro and his family moved into Uzo's mansion, their laughter echoing through rooms that once held Sharon's joy. Her children watched from afar when they passed by the street, their eyes filled with confusion and silent tears. At night, Sharon held her children close, whispering stories of their father, his kindness, his patience, his love. She refused to let bitterness consume her, but justice, she knew, was still missing. Then, something strange began to happen. The mansion, once lively with Okoro's arrogant celebrations, grew restless. The laughter faded. Screams replaced music. The first night, Okoro woke up gasping for air, convinced someone was standing by his bed. His wife laughed nervously and told him it was stress. The second night, a cold wind swept through the house, though all windows were closed. Doors slammed, lights flickered. By the third night, there was no denying it. Uzo's spirit appeared. Not in peace, but in fury. His presence was overwhelming. His eyes burned with pain and betrayal. He stood silently, watching them, his gaze piercing through their souls. Okoro screamed and ran, sweating and shaking like a frightened child. Night after night, the haunting continued. Objects flew across rooms. Mirrors shattered. Voices whispered Uzo's name. Okoro's children cried endlessly, refusing to sleep. His wife aged rapidly under the weight of terror. The mansion became a place of horror. Desperate, Okoro sought help everywhere. Prayers, rituals, sacrifices, but nothing worked. The spirit did not leave. Finally, Okoro decided to sell the mansion. He begged agents, pleaded with buyers, lowered the price, but once they heard the stories, they fled. No one wanted a cursed house. Haunted, broke, and cornered, Okoro broke. One morning, he staggered into the village square, his clothes torn, his eyes hollow. The villagers gathered as he fell to his knees. "I did it," he cried. "I killed my brother. I was jealous. I wanted his life." Gasps filled the air. He confessed everything: the witch doctor, the ritual, the lies, the betrayal. The truth spilled like poison from his lips. The villagers were horrified. Okoro was taken away, broken and defeated. His wife fled the village with her children, unable to bear the shame. For Sharon, there was no celebration, no joy, only a quiet, aching sadness. Justice had come, but Uzo was still gone. She held her children close as they stood before their old home once more, this time with the keys returned to her hands. The house felt different now, heavy, quiet, but theirs. Life would never be the same. The scars would always remain. Yet as Sharon watched Adalbi and Esomchi laugh softly under the evening sky, she felt something stir. Hope. They had survived, and together they would rebuild. As the dust finally settled and the echoes of the past began to fade into uneasy silence, Sharon found herself standing at a crossroads she never imagined she would face so early in life. The storm had passed, but it had left deep scars behind, scars carved by betrayal, loss, and a grief so profound it often felt heavier than her own body. Yet even in the quiet aftermath, one truth stood firm in her heart. She could not afford to break. Not now, not with two innocent lives depending entirely on her strength. She returned to the house that had once been her sanctuary, her footsteps slow and deliberate as they echoed through the empty corridors. The house smelled of dust and abandonment, the walls stripped of warmth, the rooms stripped of joy. Each step she took stirred memories she had tried so hard to suppress. Uzo's laughter bouncing off the walls, the soft hum of sewing machines late into the night, the sound of children's footsteps racing down the hallway. She paused in the living room, her breath catching as she imagined Uzo sitting there, sleeves rolled up, sketchbook in hand, talking excitedly about a new design or a new idea. For a moment, the pain was unbearable. Her knees weakened, and she had to steady herself against the wall. But then, she heard a soft voice behind her. "Mama." Sharon turned to see Adobe and Isomchi standing close together, their small hands clasped tightly, as though afraid to let go. Their eyes reflected fear, sadness, and something else, hope. Sharon knelt in front of them, drawing them into her arms. She held them tightly, breathing them in, grounding herself in the warmth of their bodies. "Come, my darlings," she said softly, her voice trembling but resolute. "This house may feel empty now, and it may never be exactly the same again, but it is still our home, and together we will fill it with love again." Adobe nodded slowly, swallowing hard. Isomchi pressed his face into his mother's chest, wrapping his arms around her as though she were the only solid thing left in the world. From that moment, Sharon made a decision, not just to survive, but to rebuild. The first days were the hardest. Cleaning the house felt like reopening old wounds. Every object carried a memory. Every corner whispered a reminder of what had been lost. Yet, with each sweep of the broom and each wiped surface, Sharon felt a strange sense of release, as though she was reclaiming the space from pain and darkness. When the house was finally livable again, she turned her attention to the business. Reopening Uzo's fashion house was not easy. Many workers had left, afraid of the rumors and the tragedy. Some suppliers hesitated, unsure whether the business could ever recover. Money was scarce. Doubt lingered everywhere she turned. But Sharon refused to be discouraged. She stood in the workshop one morning, surrounded by silent machines and folded fabrics, and closed her eyes. She remembered watching Uzo work, his patience, his passion, his belief that creativity could change lives. "This place will live again," she whispered. She started small, one machine, one design, one client. Day after day, Sharon worked tirelessly. She learned things she had once left entirely to Uzo: accounts, negotiations, staff management. She made mistakes and corrected them. She faced rejection and returned stronger. At night, when exhaustion weighed her down, she stitched by lantern light while her children slept nearby. Slowly, life returned to the workshop. The hum of sewing machines filled the air again. New apprentices arrived. Old clients returned, drawn by Sharon's determination and the enduring legacy of Uzo's name. Word spread quietly. The fashion house was back. Yet Sharon's greatest responsibility lay not in fabrics or designs, but in the small faces that watched her every move. Being both mother and father to Adobe and Isomchi was a burden she felt deeply. There were days she collapsed into bed, muscles aching, heart heavy with worry. But every morning she rose again, driven by love stronger than fear. She attended school meetings, helped with homework, listened patiently to childish worries, and held them through nightmares that still came too often. She became their shield, their anchor, their example of courage. One evening, as Sharon sat mending clothes, Adobe walked up to her quietly and wrapped her arms around her waist. "Thank you, Mama, for not giving up on us." Sharon froze, emotion flooding her chest. She pulled Adobe close, kissing her head gently. "You are my strength, both of you. Everything I do for you." Isomchi joined the embrace, and for a moment the world felt gentle again. As months passed, laughter slowly returned to their home. Not loud or careless laughter, but genuine, healing laughter. They celebrated small victories, a good school report, a new client, a peaceful night's sleep. They spoke of Uzo often, not with bitterness, but with love. Sharon told her children stories about their father's kindness, his generosity, his stubborn optimism. She wanted them to know him not as a tragedy, but as a man whose spirit lived on through them. And in quiet moments, Sharon felt it too, that gentle presence watching over them, proud. The journey was far from easy. There were setbacks. There were moments of fear and loneliness. There were days when grief returned without warning. But Sharon no longer faced them alone. She had her children. She had her resilience. She had love. And as they stood together one evening, watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the sky in warm hues of gold and crimson, Sharon felt a deep sense of peace settle in her heart. They were home. Not because the past had been erased, but because they had learned how to carry it without breaking. And together, they stepped into the future, stronger, wiser, and bound by a love that even death could not destroy. The story of Uzo and Okoro teaches us an important lesson about entitlement mentality and the importance of appreciating what others do for us. Okoro's sense of entitlement led him to constantly rely on his brother Uzo for financial support without taking responsibility for his own actions. Despite Uzo's generous help, Okoro never appreciated the sacrifices made on his behalf. This lack of gratitude eventually led Okoro to betray Uzo, resulting in tragic consequences for both families. The lesson here is clear. We must never take the kindness of others for granted. Instead of expecting handouts and feeling entitled to assistance, we should strive to be grateful for the help we receive and take responsibility for our own lives. By appreciating the efforts and sacrifices of others, we can build stronger relationships and create a more supportive community where everyone thrives. Thank you for watching this story on Afro Tales TV. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, leave us a comment, and share with family and friends. We have more beautiful stories coming your way, so subscribe and stay tuned. See you in the next one.